Joining me right now, Democratic strategist David Katz and retired U.S. Navy Captain Republican Armen Kurdian. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. We have this new poll out from the New York Times Siena College showing President Trump with a 1-point lead. David, I want to start with you. 1 point, some could say, isn't much, just a wiggle in the data. But what will Democrats do with those numbers?
Well, I think it's a huge improvement. You remember what things were like in the middle of July after the disastrous debate performance by Biden. So she's rebounded. She's done really well. I think she's run a great campaign. As I mentioned to you, every time I'm on, she stayed in the center and talked about things that she's going to do that are going to help Americans. Rich, poor, working families and stuff like that. So I think she's moving up in the polls. And of course, the key thing is not the vote in Idaho or California. It's in those 7 swing states. She's doing very well in the swing states. And right now, she's ahead in all the blue wall states.
And that's not a surprise. Armen, do you think that with this 1-point advantage that the former president has right now, is the honeymoon over?
Good afternoon, Adrienne. So actually, I do believe that the vice president may actually have a slight, in real terms, a 1 or 2 point advantage in the popular vote. But I do attribute that to the outsized weight of states like California and New York, because California went 60-40 for Joe Biden. 5.1 million more people voted for Biden than Trump here in the state of California. As to what they're going to do with these numbers, I don't think really it's going to matter. They're going to continue to pursue Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and Michigan, and Georgia. Those are the states that Trump needs to win. He doesn't need to win them all, but if he wins 4 of them, he definitely wins. So from a policy perspective, he's going to keep on talking about the issues that matter to Americans. I would agree with something that was said earlier in that I think the name calling needs to stop, and it's not constructive when it happens from either side of the equation. The American people are sick and tired of that. They want to hear about policies, and they want to hear about Trump's vision for the future, and they want to know how he's going to improve things over the last 4 years.
Obviously, the swing states in focus, but you both brought up the state of California. So I do know that GOP running mate J.D. Vance, he is in Southern California today for a fundraiser. You had the news out just within the past several days that former state Senate Majority Leader Gloria Romero switched parties from Democrat to Republican, joining current California State Senator Marie Alvarado Gil, who switched from Democrat to Republican last month. They say they're lifelong Democrats and that there are others like them. Are you hearing about more of this shift, David?
Well, I think most of those people who change party are opportunists, to be honest. And in California, the reason that Vance is out here is not because there's any chance that Trump is going to win California, but you can raise money here that you can spend in the swing states. And also, we do have some congressional seats in purple districts. And with the purple districts of New York and California, although we're both blue states, goes the control of the House. So that's a big deal why Vance is here and why they have to pay attention to California, even though the state will be overwhelmingly blue as a whole.
Well, yeah, it's a super majority in California. I happen to be a native of the state. But David, pointing out the money is a very important tip from David. But do you think that the Democrats still need to address, Armen, the disgruntled members of their party, people who are undecided still because they don't like the way the baton was passed between President Biden and VP Harris?
Well, I think if you look at the state of California, when Trump points to look what's happened to California, that is a big red flag and a red alert for a lot of Americans who run down the middle, who don't want to see what's actually happened here. And yes, I think the way that things were handled between Biden basically being forced out of the race, just the side of a coup by his own party in favor of the vice president, I also don't think doesn't sit well with a lot of moderate Democrats. Obviously, there's a lot more Democrats here in the state of California than there are Republicans. But over the last few years, Republican voter registration has actually outpaced Democrat voter registration the first time in a very long time. And you're seeing at the local level, at the city council, school boards, there are a lot of Republicans that are winning these local races. It's still extremely hard to win at the state level here in California for Republican, but that's changing at the grassroots level, where maybe the big money doesn't matter as much, where people's voices are being heard. So using California as an example of what might happen if far left progressives get in control of the country is, I think, one of probably the most resounding types of talking points that the Republicans can use this November for California and the country as a whole.
David Katz, Armen Kurdian, thank you to you both. Appreciate the conversation.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.